You're listening to the Creative Process Podcast. Here you will discover what drives musicians to create music and how they realize that ambition. I'm your host, Jamie Collin, founder of the online independent music magazine, Overblown. This episode is sponsored by Indie Tracks. Indie Tracks is a celebration of independent, creative, and DIY pop music. It takes place on a heritage steam railway site in the heart of Derbyshire countryside from the 28th to the 30th of July 2017. Go to indietracks.co.uk for more information. The Creative Process Podcast is sponsored by Vinylify. Vinylify is an online service that offers consumers the opportunity to create their own unique 10-inch vinyl in a few easy steps. Simply go to vinylify.com, that's vinylify.com, upload your own music, and then personalize your cover art and matching labels. Vinylify then cuts the vinyl by hand, presses the cover, and delivers it to your doorstep. We've teamed up with Vinylify to get you 10% off your first order. Simply input the code GB6QG9 at checkout. The code is valid until the 17th of July. After nearly 10 years exploring their own brand of dream pop, it is safe to say that New York's Beach Fossils have become stalwarts of the scene. On June 2nd, the group released their third and most adventurous album, Somersault. We recently spoke to Dustin Payseur, who originally started Beach Fossils as a one-man project, about giving up some creative control, doing exactly what he wants, and constant evolution.
And I read a recent interview, I think you said you're very controlling when it comes to the creative process. Why do you think that was, though?
I don't know. I guess it's just a part of my personality. I think maybe because growing up, I never really played in bands with other people. It was always just me, by myself recording stuff. Like when I was a kid, I had a 4-track. Since I didn't really have people to play music with, I taught myself all the instruments, guitar and bass and drums, and I would sing on it, and, I would play whatever else was on it. And so I just kind of grew up always writing songs completely by myself, and I never really knew how to write a song with anybody else. So that was something I guess I've been kind of figuring out over the past few years.
The new album, though, was a lot more collaborative. Were you wary of giving up some control, or...?
It wasn't an idea where I was we're going to write this album as a band, as a collaborative effort, and I'm going to give up my solo writing or whatever. That was never really a thought. We were just making music together, and we were coming up with stuff that we all really liked. And, I've never been turned off of the idea of writing with other people. I just wasn't sure how it would work or if I could. But it started to show itself that it was working, and I was really happy with what was happening. There's only a couple songs on there that I wrote pretty much entirely by myself, and the rest was collaborative. Yeah, an album never comes out how I think it's going to be. It's always totally different. When we were working on Somersault, for example, we were talking about just making a trip hop album. Then we were talking about it being just a total orchestral, soundtrack, kind of David Axelrod vibe. I don't know, before you know it, I guess there's ideas and hints of things throughout the record on different songs, but I don't think I'm very good at making one record sound like a certain sound, I guess, or I don't think I'd be happy if it came out that way. So I'm really happy that it came out. There's just in different parts of different songs, you have this variety going on.
Because this is the first album with Beach Fossils, anyway, that you've released through Bayonet Records, I believe. Did you feel that you could be more experimental or push the boundaries a bit more?
That wasn't really an issue before, but I think the one thing that made the biggest difference was the fact that I had more time to work on this because there wasn't somebody else setting a deadline. I was free to experiment and do whatever I wanted and work on this for a long time, and I didn't ever feel any pressure I've got to turn this in because if I had to turn it in, it probably would have been done 2 or 3 years ago, but it wouldn't be the same record and it wouldn't have the same feel. And because a lot of the stuff on there was also added last minute, the strings and the flute and the saxophone and all that kind of stuff was added towards the end. We had already recorded pretty much all the songs and then put all that on top of it. If there was pressure, it definitely wouldn't be like an orchestral record. having that amount of time is not necessarily that amount of time, but just being able to have an indefinite amount of time to work on something. That's really healthy for me. And, also with Bayonet, we want to give that to the artists that we work with as well. We never really put pressure or a deadline on artists. We just kind of let them do their thing because we know that they're musicians, they're artists. They already know their workflow. We shouldn't try to change that.
But then, some people work really well with a deadline.
It's very true. I mean, a lot of people can't really get focused until they have a deadline. Maybe I'm like 95%. I can't have a deadline, and then 5%. It kind of helps me because I was working on this record forever. I kept setting deadlines for myself for when it should be done. And I guess I would speed up the process of making things happen, but it wouldn't necessarily be the album would be getting done by that time, but I would be making huge steps forward. But it's also me putting a deadline for myself, putting it in the calendar, being I have to be done with this by this time. And I think I have a problem with authority, I guess. I don't even know why. It's I'm still a teenager or something. And it also helped having the other members with me, having Tommy and Jack, because if I'm left by myself, this record probably still wouldn't even be out because I just spend so long working on stuff and then not following up. I have a huge problem with leaving things unfinished. Over the course of, Beach Fossil's whole lifespan, there's thousands of songs that nobody's ever going to hear because I either just didn't know where to take them next or something, I'll write a verse and a chorus, but then I can't figure out a bridge or whatever. And then I just abandon a song and then completely forget about it. And sometimes I go back on my hard drive and I go through my old Logic files and I find stuff from years ago. And I'm I didn't even know this existed. And maybe I'll pull an idea from it or something. It's like a sketchbook almost where I can go back if I want to pull something from it.
I think you said as well that collaboration has the collaboration on the new album helps a lot with writer's block issues. And how did that help?
It's weird. I never used to get writer's block. My entire life, I never experienced it. When I wrote the first Beach Fossils record, I didn't experience it. I think it was because I didn't know or expect anybody to listen to it. And then I try to keep that completely out of mind. I try to shut off the idea that anybody else is ever going to hear this thing while I'm working on stuff because it has to be personal. I feel that's the only way it's going to be genuine, because if you're thinking about what other people want to hear, then who are you really making it for? Are you making it for yourself? Are you making it for material reasons or whatever? So I try to not think about that too much, but sometimes I will just hit a hole where I'll get writer's block and I won't feel inspired and I'll just kind of sit there. I'll go into the studio every day for a month and I can't do anything. And I think the best way for me to fix that is just to avoid going into the studio altogether. A few days later, all of a sudden I have all these ideas and I go in there and I record 3 songs in a row. Yeah, you need to give your brain some time to just relax and process. A lot of my inspiration creatively comes from Eastern philosophy, mainly Taoism, and the Tao Te Ching and stuff has inspired me a lot. The whole idea behind that is looking internal rather than external. And the idea of, I suppose, enlightenment or whatever you would want to call it, nirvana or whatever, it's already inside of you. It's already there the whole time and it's inside of everybody. And you just have to know how to find it. And I feel the same thing for creativity. It's a lot of the times people have a problem of looking external. And it's well, what kind of music do I want to make? Am I punk or do I make hip hop or do I make whatever? And it's you're looking at other people to see who you are. But if you shut all that noise out and you just look inside, you'll find, and sometimes you just need to be quiet and not focus on working at all to let that come out.
Could be quite a difficult thing to do, to kind of not consider what other people might be interested in, particularly if you've built up over a couple of albums a certain sound or something like that.
I think I have I don't know, in my personality where I just I feel I like to say fuck you to everyone, even people that like me or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like to sort of defy people's expectations and I've never really been too interested in being liked or being accepted or anything, I guess. In school I was just fucking loser kid, sitting by myself. So I was never very social or anything growing up. So that stuff never really appealed to me so much. So it was always just me. My friend was the creativity. That was the only thing that mattered to me. So tarnishing that with other people is it just seems dirty.
This episode is sponsored by Indie Tracks. Indie Tracks is a celebration of independent, creative, and DIY pop music. It takes place on a heritage steam railway site in the heart of Derbyshire countryside from the 28th to the 30th of July 2017. Go to indietracks.co.uk for more information. The Creative Process podcast is sponsored by Vanillify. Vanillify is an online service that offers consumers the opportunity to create their own unique 10-inch vinyl in a few easy steps. Simply go to vanillify.com, that's VINYLIFY.com, upload your own music, and then personalize your cover art and matching labels. Vanillify then cuts the vinyl by hand, presses the cover, and delivers it to your doorstep. We've teamed up with Vanillify to get you 10% off your first order. Simply input the code GB6QG9 at checkout. The code is valid until the 17th of July.
Your sound is obviously always constantly evolving. Where do you think this desire for evolution comes from, or to constantly push things forward?
I'm not really sure. I guess just always putting like goals on myself for things that I would like to achieve musically, just trying to do things that I haven't done before. And I always want to experiment with things that I've never really tried out and see what happens. I didn't have a specific goal in mind for even how the orchestral stuff was going to work out. I just knew that I wanted it. I mean, that's definitely been something on my mind since I was a kid, is, incorporating so many different instruments onto one album. It's always been something I've wanted to try out, but I never knew how people did that. I thought you had to have like a huge label and have a massive budget to be able to pull something like that off. And finally was able to figure out how to do this kind of stuff, on a budget. Everything has come from like a friend of a friend, I guess. It's never like me having like a manager reach out to a total stranger and them giving us this like ridiculous price. It's always been more like we have our boots on the ground and we're figuring this all out ourselves.
Are the strings and things on the album, are they live or are they synthetic?
Yeah, they're all live strings, except for the song Sugar, which like we purposefully wanted the strings in the song Sugar to be like mellotron strings. That was another thing. It was like, how do you find someone? Like, what do? Do you like write a song and then you bring it to like a composer, arranger, and have them like write the string parts on top of it or something? Like, I never knew how that would work. And I also didn't really like the idea of someone writing something on top of songs that I've done. So we wrote those string parts ourselves. None of us really has like any music, like I don't know what you would call it, like, school or music school. Yeah, exactly. Like none of us have any of that. I guess like Tommy, our guitarist, he was in like band in like middle school or something. So I think that's like the most knowledge any of us have. So we were just writing the string parts ourselves on a keyboard. And we figured out, what the range is for cello, viola, violin, and then kind of wrote like for a quartet and just hired a quartet like the day before and then brought the sheet music into them, which was so insane, actually, like thinking about it, just because I'd never done that before. I had no clue if it was going to work, but I'm really happy it worked. Yeah, Tommy was kind of cleaning it up. Like he knows if something looks right or wrong when it's written out like that, but I mean, there's no way we could just sit down and like write it. Like we definitely had to do it with like keyboard and like mess around with that.
How did you figure out the ranges?
Just Google. We were just like Googling like the range for like a cello or for a violin or viola or something, and then we would find that range on the keyboard, and then just write the individual parts for each instrument just on the keyboard in that range.
It's an interesting approach, because I'm not an expert, but it seems to me that a lot of people would outsource that. Like, as you said, you wanted to keep control of it. I think you said that it would feel alien to you, I think was the word you used, if somebody else had done it. And what about your approach to writing lyrics? Do they come after the song is written, or do you have them already written and you incorporate them into songs?
It's a little bit of both, I guess. Like I keep a notebook, or I keep a lot of notebooks, I guess, of just various like thoughts and ideas and observations and stuff. So I'm always writing down ideas in these notebooks whenever I'm thinking of something. Not necessarily for any purpose either. Like I'm not like when I write it down, I'm not really thinking like this is for lyrics. I just write it down just as something, just to keep a record, I guess, of something that I've thought or something I thought was interesting. And then usually when the song is done, actually, I mean, the whole album was done. Like instrumentally, we had finished the entire record and there was no vocals on it. I sat down with all the songs and I would kind of hum vocal melodies on top of it and kind of record those scratch vocals. And then I would listen back to it while flipping through the notebooks and just see if anything seemed to fit the mood of the song or if any of the words would fit as far as like, amount of syllables I needed for something or whatever. And then, I'd kind of put down a line here and there that would work and then kind of flesh it out with ideas on the spot to kind of like fully realize what that thought meant when it was originally written in the notebook. And that's why I like most of my songs, like they're not about one thing. Every line is kind of about something else because it's just little flashes of experience here and there, I guess. So yeah, there's not a lot of consistency, but I guess there is at the same time because I guess there's like a thematic consistency within the songs and within the album, I guess. But it's rare that I'll write lyrics for an entire song in just one sitting really quick like that. I guess like one of the only ones that was like that was Down the Line. Like I wrote that whole song in pretty much just like one go. I just kind of sat down and it just like came out of me. But that's been rare.
I think as well that obviously you started out as kind of a bedroom musician, I guess. And despite the development of your sound, I think the new album still retains the intimacy of a bedroom project, despite the fact that there's strings and it's quite grand. And is that intimate sound something that's important for you to maintain?
Definitely. I think the reason that still translates in that way, I guess, is because it's still very homegrown. I produced pretty much the entire thing by myself, except I had a couple engineers help out here and there. We had somebody engineer the strings and the harpsichord for us, and then we had somebody engineer the drums. But for the most part, I'm just recording it in my own studio, which is like directly across the street from my house. So if I ever have like any ideas, it's like 3-4 in the morning, I can just like walk over there and start recording. I recorded in the studio once before, like I recorded in the studio for Clash the Truth. The guy that I was working with, he was cool. He's a friend of mine. I really like him, but I think the idea of like a studio environment just doesn't work for me. It just feels really weird, and there also seems to be like this pressure because it's like, oh, we've paid for this and we're only here for a certain amount of time, and it kind of puts this pressure on me that is a bit crippling, I guess. Yeah, I just need to be able to have like my freedom.
So it seems to me from talking to you that this is the idea that's most important to you is having the freedom and the opportunity to explore as much as you want.
Right. Yeah. Because I can work really slow, and I guess I don't even realize how slow I can work. I just get caught up in things, like I'll sit there. If I have the bass recorded, I'll sit there with the guitar and I'll just have that bass on loop and I'll just play guitar on top of it. Sometimes I'll play guitar on top of it for like a full hour and not even necessarily trying to write anything. I'm just like jamming on top of it. And I'm just like messing around until something comes out that I like, I guess. I feel like you can't really do that in a studio. You've got some like other people sitting there and they're just like, what the fuck is this guy doing? He's like playing guitar for like 2 hours. I think I need to write with the door closed, like I don't work very well when there are professionals around, I guess, like it's different when it's my bandmates because like we're all on the same level with that. We're all like happy to sit in the room for 8 hours and just fuck around on like one riff, because like we all really enjoy doing that and it's very meditative. But I think if you've like hired someone in, you should probably be like past that already. The thing for me is like I write and record at the same time. And so I guess that intimate feeling when you listen to it is because when I recorded it, it was fresh. The idea was brand new and there was like a lot of emotion in it. A lot of the times when people go to a studio, they've already written that song and they take it into the studio and just record it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Creative Process Podcast. Make sure to check out the show notes in our podcast section at overblown.co.uk. Here you will find links to everything mentioned in this episode. Overblown and the Creative Process podcast are both an entirely DIY venture. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can become a patron of Overblown at patreon.com/overblown. See you down the front.